Hello and welcome to Tonight's Return, a tabletop roleplay podcast. My guest today has brought us a regal journey through a kingdom at risk. A story of emotion, trust, dedication, and betrayal. She may have learned this tale by being descended from the monarch in question, or from their vehement defence. We know that they play the hand dealt them, but also find solace in the adventures of the precious little moments we have to ourselves, like a creature or animal of habit, trying not to send mixed messages or build a wall between us, and instead towering up to the heights that are forbidden by some or may court tragedy for others, is game designer Alex Roberts. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for introducing me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Alex, before we go into your many and varied projects, how did you get into tabletop role-playing games, please?
So that depends on when you start. That depends on when I sort of count the beginning, because definitely as a kid, I was just a bossy kid, and I wanted to be in charge of playing. And I had a sort of idea about D&D, right? Like absorbed from, I don't know, pop culture, right? Some cartoon with a D&D episode. And so I was like, oh yeah, I'm the dungeon master. And so, when I'm like 8, 9, 10, and we're playing what I consider D&D, where I tell everyone what's going on and they tell me what they're doing. And so it's very free form, I guess. And then in high school, I got to meet people who actually had the books, who actually played the real Dungeons and Dragons, which at that time would have been like 3.5. So I played a little bit of that, and in like a very high school way where we just like made characters and then whatever, just kind of wasted time and had fun. And then I played a little bit of fourth edition in when I was in university, which I didn't really care for. And yeah, I kept coming back to D&D a bunch of different times, and I eventually got to this place where I was like, yeah, I thought I would like this, but I guess I don't. And I talked to a good buddy of mine, who I was kind of just starting to be friends with at that time, and I knew that he was into RPGs. And I said, yeah, you know what, Patrick? I've played 3.5, I've played fourth edition. I thought I liked RPGs, but I guess I just don't. I thought I did, but I don't. And I think he was running a campaign of Burning Wheel at that time, and he was like, oh my God, Alex, there's so much more out there. So, so he made this this role playing game group and invited me, and so I started playing. This would have been maybe like 2010-ish, I guess. Maybe a little bit after that. And so I started playing everything that was really, really big at that time. Like we played Fiasco, right? That was my first kind of non-D&D role-playing game. And I was like, oh my God, I love this. This is everything I wanted. And we played Dread, and we played Apocalypse World, and My Life with Master, and Shock, and Misspent Youth, and like that whole kind of generation of indie games. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So since then, basically, I've just kind of been voraciously seeking new games to play, and I had been playing those for a couple of years, and then I met some people who were LARPing, so I got really excited about that. And so then I just totally fell head over heels in love with LARP, started going to conventions and stuff, and then, I mean, it wasn't long after that that I started designing.
So, I mean, that's a many and varied sort of spread across the sort of the tabletop role playing game plethora. Um, what's your well, first of all, we'll start with where people can find you because that should be enough to hook anybody in to come and find you in your thing. So where can they find you in your products?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Muscular Pikachu. um, but yeah, if you go to just helloalexroberts.com, you can find my Patreon on there where I'm kind of releasing sort of small little experiments and ideas and stuff. But if you want to play my published stuff, gosh, For the Queen, right, is at your friendly local game store, which is like a card-based storytelling game that is 100% truly no GM, no prep. Not like someone has to facilitate, or you kind of have to like literally you open that game and you can start playing. I'm so proud of that game. And you can play Star-Crossed, which is my two-player role-playing game of forbidden love that uses the Jenga tower to simulate an increase in romantic or sexual tension. And I have a bunch of different games in anthologies. So I made a game called Pop, which is about an online community of people who very, very much love balloons. And it's played in person. And the idea is, I mean, we've played it online now because everyone's playing online, but the idea was to simulate the experience of being in an online community using pen and paper. Um, Gosh, I made a game about beloved Canadian TV series The Littlest Hobo that's in the Ultimate Micro RPG anthology. Gosh, there's probably even more than that. I'm realizing now, I'm like, "Dang, I've made a lot of games."
You have to add to the ones you haven't
Mm.
mentioned, Our Time on Earth
Yes.
and the Kickstarter project that is still up on Kickstarter, Precious Little Animals as
Yeah,
well.
that's right. So those are my more recent ones. I made oh gosh, where to start? So I made, Our Time on Earth, in December of last year, or December 2019, actually. Um
Mm,
and I was working on it and play testing it and stuff. And so it's a game where you play two aliens who are on Earth for a limited time, and you decide why you're visiting, right? For research, or you're a tourist or whatever. But you're staying hidden among the humans, and so you play it for six weeks or 6 days or 6 months, and you play it with someone who's not in the same room as you, and you correspond with them whenever you feel like it in the guise of your alien. So it's basically just a way to talk about your experience, to notice your experience as you move through life, and to kind of take a step back from it and realize how strange and beautiful it is. Um, and so you share that with another person. And if you're like me and you have a lot of moments in life where you feel like an alien, that's kind of what it's meant to express. And the idea is that you can share that with another person. So I was playtesting it in December of last year, and I just connected people to play it. And what they told me, what I found is that they were really just like, "Oh, it's so nice to connect with someone over a long distance." Um, and then we now then we were in a pandemic, and so
mm.
that particular format of just checking in with people and just texting them or just sending them a little picture or a little message in a way that's pretty low key. Um, yeah, some people have shared that that was a really important experience. So thank you for mentioning that game, because it is just a small little thing. It's up in PDF on itch, and but I really wish more people would play it because I think it's a very cute and it's a nice little kind of accessible, pervasive experience.
Yeah, definitely, and just some of the games you mentioned
Mm.
there have such wildly different game mechanics. Have you? I mean, there's what cards, wooden towers, mobile phones, journaling is one for Precious Little Animals. What's it like to experiment with all these different nuances of the genre and the mechanics therein?
I think maybe I don't know, I get bored easily, and I and I like games that do something really different, right? Like if I get excited about a game, it's probably because it does something mechanically really weird. That is always, maybe not always, but that's very often more exciting to me than the content, right? So if you're pitching a game to me and you're saying, "Oh, it's about this subject that you like," I might get interested. But if you're pitching a game to me and you're saying, "Yeah, and um, you use wooden cubes, but they're not dice; they don't have pips on them, but you just position them in a certain way." Like if there's something really novel in
Hmm.
the mechanics, I get really excited. So I think I'm the same way as a designer, and and I don't know. I think also when you're just interacting with the world, there's like a particular lens that you can put on it to be like, could this be a game? Can I play this? Right? So if I'm standing in line at the post office, or if I'm in my backyard, or if I'm cutting the grass in my backyard, or I'm playing something, then how can could I make this into a game? Where's the game?
Hmm.
It was literally just um this is such a tangent, but now it's on my mind. As just before this interview, playing an old video game with my roommate called Stellar Assault. It's I've been getting really into emulation lately. So it came out on the
Hmm.
32X, and we were playing all the games for the 32X. We played this game, and it's like really, really, really simple game. Like it's kind of an asteroids type thing, but you're like first person view, and one of the players controls where the ship is pointing, and the other player controls like the shooting, right? So you're out there and you're eliminating
Hmm.
targets, and it's like really, really basic polygons, super simple chiptune, music, and it's very sparse and very minimalist because of the limitations of the hardware. And so as soon as he and I are playing this game, I'm like, so why are we in this war? And also like, so like I'm the pilot and you're like the gunner. Like,
Hmm.
what's that relationship like? Do all the ships in our fleet have this pilot gunner thing? What does that mean when we go back to base? Like, do people just hang out with their pilot or their gunner, or do they like just hang out with other
with the
gunners. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
gunners. Yeah.
And like, what's that divide like? And like, how does that get decided? Does one of them have more status than the other one? Is the other one looked
Mm.
down on? Like, do gunners wish they were pilots, or do pilots wish they were gunners? Or like, did we decide that, or do like some computer decide that for us? Right. So we're immediately start like talking about that. And so I think, wow, literally even when I'm playing a game, I'm just like, oh, but like, what if this was like a game though? Like, how would this be a role playing game? Yeah, I don't know. I like exploring stuff like that.
I want you to make this game
Well,
up.
yeah,
That
the more
sounds
I'm
a lot of
talking about
fun.
it, the more like, yeah.
Business plan. Uh, so while you're making all these notes, is your friend sat next to you going, "Steer the ship"?
No, he's very patient. Yeah. I think if you're friends with me, you have to actively enjoy me getting excited and going on tangents and being completely distracted from what's happening. You need to be really on board with that. And actually, he and I are designing a role-playing game together because we watched the baseball episode of Deep Space Nine a little while ago,
Mm,
and there's this whole trope about like a baseball episode, right? So we started talking about, he has a regular D&D group, and we've played a little bit of role-playing games together. But we started talking about like, what if you could take your regular campaign, right? Like your regular um, team or whatever, or your party, that's the
mm,
word, and have a baseball episode with them. Like, what if we made a game that was a one shot where you take your usual characters, but now you put them in some situation where for some reason they have to be on a baseball team together, and for whatever contrived reason you decide. And we're like, yeah, what would that be like? Like, how would you set up scenes like that? What are the tropes? What are the archetypes? Like, how would you decide which character plays which role? And I don't know anything about baseball, but he used to play baseball, so he understands that side of it. And
mm.
yeah, so we've been watching baseball episodes and trying to come up with game ideas around that. So yeah,
One for the future. That's
exactly.
two you've got racked up already.
Yeah, I'm in a creative mode. I think it's because it's springtime.
That is entirely fair. That is entirely fair. So, with inspiration coming from, say, the video games or the TV shows and the tropes and things like that, which of the games that you played do you think has influenced you the most?
Probably, geez, honestly, games that have had a big impact on me.
Hmm.
Um, I think honestly, probably Fiasco has had a huge, huge impact on how I think about design. There's something about like imprinting on it, right? Like it really was the first game I played after Dungeons and Dragons, and I really, when I think about it, hadn't played that much. So I think I'm realizing this actually because as he and I are talking about a baseball episode game, I'm immediately thinking about it in terms of scenes and in
Hmm.
spotlight scenes and there's a general design philosophy in Fiasco of like, how can I give you the smallest amount of information for you to do the most with, right? Like it's just this minimalism and it's an almost a kind of efficiency in the simplicity. And so I think whatever my games end up looking like, I often kind of go back to or it's like my default is thinking in Fiasco
Hmm.
in terms of um, let's keep it super simple, use the minimum information and give people the most space to like just play around and have fun and come up with stuff. Like really, really give people the lightest guidelines that you can to like kind of let them go. Mm.
Yeah, no, it sounds a lot of fun. And some of your games, say for instance, Our Time on Earth uses mobile phones. Um, there are there's very few other games that kind of use the technology around us. The only one that really springs to mind is Alice is Missing
Right.
by Spencer Stark,
Yeah.
which uses mobile phones. Um, is that something you sort of consciously decided, or had the pen pal sort of paper system sort of fallen out of fashion?
So here, yeah, that's the thing is that really my ideal game of Our Time on Earth, I think would be a pen and paper game. And maybe some people have played it that way because really, like, half of the reason why I want to play role playing games is to get away from a screen. So
Mm,
even though it's this incredibly rich, like, design space and has all these cool affordances, my default is to want to get away from that and like to to think about in person stuff and tangible stuff. But it's been really interesting over the past year and a half, right, to see people pivot to, okay, well, yeah, really we want to be in person, but what if we can't be? And so how do we
mm,
make the equivalent, of our in-person games, which people have been extremely creative with, doing really interesting stuff. But also, like, there really is a whole tradition now, and which kind of existed before the pandemic to a certain extent, of of live action online gaming, like LAUGs, right? So I think like people think about ViewScream, right, as being one of the really early ones, but there's a bunch of them. Um, yeah, Garrett Reininghaus has written a lot about this tradition, and obviously it's seen a huge uptick in interest, and um, and so it's been interesting to see people in that space. And and like I said, I made a game that was specifically to simulate being in an online community, a very like divided, confused online community in real life, right, using pen and paper, and that was really cool. But this year I had to run it online. We just played it in a Discord server, so I kind of thought like, oh, what is the point of this? But at the end of the day, people had fun, and it
Mm,
was cool, and people had a good time. So that's what matters.
very true. How has the LARPing side of things? How has your pre sort of TTRPG experience led you into LARPing, and how has your LARPing helped your TTRPG experience?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I think I really found when I started LARPing, which for me has not really been is not been in like vampire LARPing or like foam swords type LARPing.
Hmm.
I have played a little bit of combat LARP, and I it's very cool, but it's not the thing that I get excited about. I get excited about like scenario LARP, short run stuff, freeform stuff, stuff that's kind of contained, that's a single very focused story with really focused ideas, and intense emotional impact that, wraps up in 2 hours.
Hmm.
And so I kind of discovered that through LARP that's a really good role playing experience for me. I really like it. I'm more excited about that than I am about a weekend long thing, or an ongoing thing. And so I think me and a lot of other designers who discovered that through LARP went, okay, well, maybe that's also actually the experience I want to have at the table.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of sensibilities around like, again, when you're LARPing, you have to give people you have to give people the minimum amount of info because they can't have a huge long character sheet and be referring to it all the time if they're interacting face to face and
Hmm.
moving right around a space. So you have to think about like what's the least amount of information I can give people so that they don't have to carry too much in their head and so that they can use it as a springboard for interesting dramatic interactions. So I think I really like LARPing, but I think it also, when I'm designing a tabletop game, I'm thinking like, okay, well, this involves sitting down and it involves more narration than movement, but there are still design features of a good LARP that I think apply to what I like in a game, which is again like about giving people a powerful experience, it being pretty focused, it being not too long, and uh, and again making sure you give people springboards, right? Like minimum info for maximum impact. I'm always thinking about that.
So, taking all that into consideration, I'm going to put you
Mm,
on the spot here a little bit, and I apologise in advance.
great.
Which of your own games do you feel
Mm.
applies those principles the best?
Ooh, good question. I think Hero Dog Saves Town, which is the my micro RPG in that collection, is probably the LARPiest. You get very, very little information. You don't really come up with characters. You're writers in the writers' room of a TV show about a dog, and one of you plays the dog who stars in and is the head writer and actually the director of the show. And so it's very, very LARPy because it's very physical. And if you're the dog character, then you will literally like bark at people and shake your head and make dog sounds. So there's that. But I am also, I think, when I think about Starcrossed, like in terms of providing a really focused narrative, it definitely does that. Like
Mm.
Starcrossed has a scene structure, right? So there's 8 scenes in the game. Each one is described on a little card with like 3 words. And so you always follow this scene structure, but at the same time, the instructions are so vague that they could almost be interpreted any way. So I think of that as like as very important, and it's important to how the design works, and it's important in terms of again giving people a railing, not like putting them on a conveyor belt, but giving them this railing so that they kind of just have a little stabilizing. Like, okay, what are we going to do in the next scene? Okay, the next scene is called Hard at Work.
Mm.
Okay, cool. Well, and that can give you an idea depending on who your characters are and what they're doing. Um, and the and character setup is just like 2 questions. Um, I think there are certain things about the mechanics of Starcross that are like that feel kinda lumpy to me now, or they feel kinda like fidgety or awkward or something. I don't know. Um, but overall, in terms of a very, very focused narrative with minimum information for maximum impact, and also having like a tangible embodied component, right? Because you're touching the tower when you speak, you're pulling from the tower when you're doing something that increases the closeness between the characters. There's just a visceral impact when the tower falls or when you push it over.
Mm.
So I think, yeah, it's there's so much about that game that I'm like, oh, I wish it was like smoother here or like simpler here. But overall, like I really, really did bring those priorities to it.
Would you consider releasing or re-editing it, or releasing a sequel, inverted commas, that would work on that? Is that something you could look to do, or are you, are you proud of how it is? You're just aware of its nuances.
I think I am the only one who has these complaints about it. Like, if I start hearing from players that they're like, "Yeah, it's good, but, like, it messes up in these ways," then we can talk about revising, but I think it's just me. I'm the only one who and that's just the way that you feel about things when you make them, right? I'm sure you've had that experience as well of, like,
Yeah,
everyone's like, "Oh, it's great," and you're like, "No, I know. I can see all the mistakes. I can see all the
I know
less than
what's behind the
optimal."
curtain. I know what I've swept under the carpet. Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
So, uh, with with such a varied portfolio, I'm coming up with new words all the time. I love expanding my vocabulary in the middle of a conversation. Um, is there a mechanic out there that you've seen that you thought I like? I like the principle in that. We've mentioned the wooden block tower, the Jenga tower, mobiles, cards, and things like that. Journals. We'll talk about precious little animals shortly. Um, but is there a mechanic that exists in another game that maybe you thought I'm just going to put that at the back of my mind. I'm going to plant that seed somewhere, and I'm going to it's going to come to me at some point as a formed idea.
Let me think about this. Let me think, because I feel like there's mechanics like this all the time. Like
Mm.
I'm always seeing things in games where I'm like, "Oh, that's really good." Um, one thing I really like, I'm playing an ongoing campaign of Night Witches right now, and one thing I really like is that you have moves, because it's like a Powered by the Apocalypse game. So
Okay.
you have moves you can do, but
Mm.
they're kind of separated into day and night. So there's like a different move sheet,
Ah.
whether it's at night or during the day. And that's very specific to that game because like you're playing these Soviet airwomen who are doing bombing runs in World War II. And so at night you're bombing, you're flying, and then during the day have the difficulty of living on base and being the only women in the army and all this stuff and having relationships with each other and drama and the horrors of war, etc.
Mm.
So that it's very specific to the way that the game works, but there's something about like doing day night cycle stuff that is cool to me.
Mm.
Um, and that has kind of been rolling around in my brain a little bit, especially because the things you do during the day kind of feed into what happens at night. There's like a mission pool you can add to that can
Mm.
help you in your roles at night, and that again works very well for the way the game is talking about like camaraderie and connection and how that plays out actually in combat. So that's cool. But also I'm like, what else can we do with day and night? Like,
Mm.
and switching back and forth and really having like a cyclical approach to games like that. So that's one that's been bouncing around in my head recently.
That's the
Mm.
first time I've ever heard of that game, and it sounds great fun.
Oh, it's
It
super cool.
sounds,
It's
yeah.
super great. Yeah. It's yeah, it's very, very fun, and I don't normally play ongoing games. I love a one shot. I've
Mm.
played a couple of like 2 or 3, 4, maybe 5 session campaigns here and there, but they don't usually interest me. And so I kind of agreed to play a one shot of Night Witches that a friend of mine was running, and I said, "Yeah, yeah, we'll play a one shot, or like, if it spills over into 2 sessions, that's fine." And this was months ago. We just haven't stopped playing. I just can't stop playing. Yeah.
Carpet bomb the entire place, but you're still playing.
Exactly. Exactly. So,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, no. As I say, I'm trying to expand beyond sort of the two or three standard tabletop role playing games,
Mhm.
trying to broaden my own game horizons. So I'll definitely look into to your more of yours and some that you've mentioned. I'm just excited for the future for what you may create now. But precious little things. Would you mind sort of expanding on that for us?
So I honestly really wow, where do I start with that game? Honestly, a lot of that game was driven by the fact that I'm working on a master's thesis right now, and it just feels like the most endless process. Like, it's very cool, I love research, but, um but it just feels like it's never going to end, and I
Mm,
will never have something tangible at the end of it. And and so the Zine Quest thing, right, which Kickstarter has done for a couple of years where they're like, yeah, just for the month of February, like put up something that has a short term, small goal, just print something super simple and get it out there. That was really, really, really appealing to me. And I was thinking about it in the months leading up to February. And I was thinking, God, I want to make something. I want to finish something
mm,
and have it be good. And and I think right now is, again, talking about like design sensibilities right now, is a good time for journaling games and a good time for solo games. I
mm,
think are really having a moment. And so I wanted to make a journaling and a solo, like a one player thing that you could just sit down and do a little bit every day. That would just be like a nice, pleasant, good experience.
mm,
Um, and yeah, so I myself have for many years now, actually, maybe going on 2 or 3 years. Um, I like to write down at the end of each day 3 good things that happened. And some people call this a gratitude practice, but I literally just think of it as just noticing 3 good things,
mm,
right? It's easier to notice bad things than it is to notice good things. So compensate that for a little bit. Um, so it's been a really enriching practice for me and has brought me a lot of joy. And in particular, has like really helped during really hard times, which the past couple of years have been. And so I thought like, how could I like share that practice with people, but also do it in a way that was playful and that felt approachable? And yeah, so the end result of that was thinking it was Precious Little Animal. And I thought, what if it was just a zine? You could just kind of fill in the blanks.
mm,
And the idea, you know, just for the audience, the premise of the game is that you come up with a precious little animal. You come up with a little sort of humanoid-ish, little anthropomorphic, cute animal that has a life of its own that is in some way parallel to yours. So if you can kind of picture like a Peter Rabbit or Owlie or like Hello Kitty or something like that, you come up with this cute little animal, and then at the end of the day, you have to pick 3 things that happened to you that day that also will happen to that animal. So 3 good things from your life, and you have to imagine them happening to that animal and write down how it went for them, right? So the idea is that like they live this cute little storybook life. So, if you had, if your friend Mark, you had a Zoom call with your buddy Mark, then, the little bunny had, their owl friends stop by and, hoot at them. So there's like, yeah, so there's this translation process that happens, but really the game is about like treating yourself as though you are a precious little animal, which I believe very much that people are.
mm,
And and so it has that noticing practice of just getting in touch with your experience and remembering, okay, what are 3 good things that happen each day? And then there's also that idea of like translating it into this compassionate thing, into like what would I want to happen to someone else, to like a precious person or precious little being. And so, I play tested a little bit, but I really wonder about the impact that it has on people. And I think it has a good chance of putting people more in touch with the good things that are happening in their lives. But I also wonder, and I don't know, like I really hope that it orients people towards doing good things for themselves and giving themselves nice things to write about later.
mm,
Which again, like just playing, particularly people who've been playing really in the last year when there's not as much opportunity to get out and do nice things, or you have a very limited scope of experience that you have to pay very careful attention to, and we're being bombarded with bad news, and people are experiencing grief and loss, and um, so yeah, I don't know what kind of impact it's really had on people. I've gotten good feedback, but yeah, my secret hope is that it makes people treat themselves more preciously, I guess.
mm. I'm sure it does, and the artwork is, yeah, it invokes the sort of simplicity is perhaps the wrong word, but it sort of draws you in to sort of fill in the blanks with your own mind rather than sort of laying it all out there in a overly graphical art style that you may not connect with. So
Thank you. Thank you, and please say simplicity because I love simplicity. And, I started thinking, when because the Kickstarter did way better than I was expecting. And I thought, like, these are just my little animal drawings. Like, what if I got a really good illustrator, to do some really beautiful pictures for it, and I thought that would be nice. But honestly, one of the things is that you, the player, are invited to draw your little animal.
Hmm.
And oh my God, I find it so beautiful when people draw their animals and then they like tweet about them or send me a picture. Oh, I love that so much. And the thing is, I think that, I'm not an amazing artist. They're pretty simple drawings, but the idea is that like don't be intimidated by it. Like don't think, oh, I can't draw it unless I draw something really good. Like, no, 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 just
Hmm.
draw it. Just do it. Look, I did one. It's okay. It's not great. So you can do one too. So yeah, that accessibility and that just like and simplicity very much so. Particularly because again, I made this game in a short span of time. I really wanted to have a finished product relatively quickly. The idea had been around for many months, but making it happened in a relatively short span of time. And I wanted to be able to produce it, like locally, right?
Hmm.
I just had it printed at the print shop on campus. Like that was really important to me. So yeah, simplicity is actually the highest compliment for this particular game.
And I just the train of thought that because you draw it yourself, you
Mm.
connect with that precious little animal more. So
I
it's
hope so. Yeah, I really hope so. And this is something I like making players do is go out on a limb a little bit creatively.
mm,
And so I don't like there's illustrations in Precious Little Animal, but there's no like you can pick this one or that one if you want. And in Starcrossed, a lot of people have asked me like can we have like some sample or like can I have a list of characters or pairings to choose from? And I'm like, no, because I believe in you. I believe that whatever you make for yourself is going to be more interesting for you,
mm.
not because it's like better, but because it's it's you, right? Like if you fill in the blanks, you're going to come up with stuff that's meaningful to you, that reflects your experience, that reflects how you feel about things, that reflects what media you like, whatever it is, right? So I know it's intimidating for some people, I think sometimes to come up with a lot from like just from nothing, but everyone can do it. I believe
Mm.
that very firmly. And I really, really think that whatever I give you as a designer is not going to be half as good as what you come up with on your own.
I would say in a counterpoint to that, a lot of people might refer or prefer lists and archetypes because they're uncomfortable to let themselves go a little bit and put themselves out on the page. Whereas, as you say, your games challenge them to do so and bring the player and the character form a bond that potentially you wouldn't get from just going, I'll be desk clerk, ranger,
Yeah.
X class, race, ancestry, whatever it is. You can go,
Yeah.
yeah, that's me. Whereas
Yeah.
you have to apply yourself to the game in some way and connect with it.
Yeah. And again, like, I talk about this ideal of like the minimum amount of information for the maximum impact, right? Giving people that springboard, but that's not an exact science, right? And so sometimes you can give like how much is enough to get them going without filling in blanks that they could do for themselves. Like I
Mm.
don't want to do anything for a player that they could do for themselves because they'll do a better job of it, right? If they can just do it, it's going to be more interesting to them than whatever I give them. But there is this question of like how much is enough? Like how much points them in the right direction that I'm hoping for as a
Mm.
designer, and how much kind of gives them that push or that spring versus kind of leaving them cold. And again, you have no way of knowing. I mean, you play test, right? Play test, but, like, it's never 100%. You can't actually say.
It's it's tough, but moving on to a game that does have gorgeous artwork that is
Mhm.
ready and filled out, not filled out the blanks because there's always space between the words and the cards in this respect. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about For the Queen, please?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, for the Queen comes with some absolutely beautiful art, that we had commissioned from a bunch of different illustrators. There's, like, 12 or 15 cards, and there's almost that number of illustrators. We really wanted a lot of different perspectives and different styles and, different people working on it, and, um, and it was really fun to work with them. Um, and the thing is, honestly, when I started working with Evil Hat, who published the game,
Hmm.
they were like, "Yeah, so let's get some illustrations." And I initially said no. I was like, "No, no, no." Because I'd been playing this game for a couple months with just like a deck of index cards that I had
Mm.
written on, right? Like that's what that was my prototype. And I was like, "No, no, no, that shouldn't because you're giving them ideas. Like you want them to just start raw and like start fresh and start like with nothing and have them build it from scratch." And um, but they were 100% right because so many people have said, "Oh, I got interested in this game because of the art," or like,
Mm.
"Oh, there's something about this piece that really spoke to me and it was beautiful," or whatever. So the publisher was 100% right. This is why you work with publishers because because they can give you a little outside viewpoint on things sometimes. Um, but but yeah, so in For the Queen, you have these evocative pieces of art that you can choose to use or not, by the way. I still, as much as I agree the art is amazing and a great asset to the game, I love it when people play without picking any of the sort of illustrations of the Queen.
Mm.
Um, but even then, right, even if you start with that illustration or that idea, um, you don't name your character. You don't have a character sheet in this game. And you don't decide in advance where you are or who you are or where you're going. You have, again, the very, very minimum setup. The idea is that you're on a journey with a queen. She's going to a she's going to a land that may or may not be hostile. It's a dangerous journey. You don't know exactly why you're going. And the idea is that you the players are the only people in the retinue with this queen. You're the only one accompanying her. No one plays the queen. And it says in the game she chose you because she knows that you love her. So you start out that way, right? Like that's the seed. And then all you do is just draw questions from a deck of question cards, and then you answer them in character or you answer them about your character. And the questions can be anything from, um, what's the world, what's the land that you're traveling through right now, and why does it make you nostalgic? Or what's the hardest part on this journey, and how do you get the retinue through it? Um, or it could be something like, when did you first know you were in love with the queen? Or you don't know if you can forgive the queen for something. What was it? What happened? Um, and these just come out randomly, so you end up building a character that's kind of in response to the questions, but mostly in response to whatever comes to mind when you look at that question and however you answer it. And again, you're starting from nothing, so just whatever you answer is true, and whatever anyone else says is true, and you just build from there. And so, I mean, yeah, talking about that balance between giving people the springboard, giving people enough to go on while making it interpretive and making sure that they can take it in their own direction wherever they want to. Um, yeah, um, something about that is very, very cool. And it makes it so much fun to watch people play, to play with people of different experience levels, to play
Mm.
with people who play different kinds of games, right? To play that with LARPers, to play that with like hardcore D&D people, to play that with like, people who only play Apocalypse World games. Like to play it with people who've never played a role-playing game before is my favorite thing in the world. Um, because yeah, people just really bring themselves to the game, and because they have so few guardrails,
Mm.
even though it's a very specific setup in certain ways, right, fictionally. But after that, you're kind of just off the leash, and people bring themselves, right? They just bring their assumptions and they bring their priorities. They bring what they think is cool, what they think is sad, what they think is romantic,
Mm.
and they just put it out there, and it's amazing to watch. I just love it.
It sounds good. If someone, which I'm sure they are after hearing that description, were interested in seeing the game played, is there anywhere where they could find examples of it?
Oh yes. So there's a couple of games up on the actual play channel, which is I guess not very specific, but it's Sean Nittner's channel. He works for Evil Hat,
Hmm.
who published the game. So they've put up a couple of playthroughs that are really good. There's one on the official Roll20 channel because there's like a Roll20 module to play it in that is quite good. Um, I'm trying to think. I think there's an episode of the One Shot podcast where we play For the Queen. So that's like an audio one.
Uh,
Um, I think so.
yeah, Jeff Stormer, the Party of One podcast.
Oh, I think you're right. Yeah, did Jeff and I play For the Queen? Oh my God. I don't even remember. Cut that out because I'll feel bad if
I
Jeff
can just
Stormer
repeat the
thinks I don't
question.
remember his game.
You did
Um,
because I checked it before I came on.
oh, okay, great. Yes, I played it with Jeff Stormer. There's also actually a really, really great um, play of me and Jeff playing Starcross that is amazing, where we play professional wrestlers who are rivals. It's fantastic, it's fantastic. Um, so, yeah, there's a bunch of different places to hear it, and if you listen to a couple of actual plays, you will really hear how different people have very different answers to the same question, like, wow.
Mm. It sounds a lot of fun and really exciting, and that's available from, so For the Queen is available from Evil
Um,
Hat.
yes, Evil Hat Productions, so you can I think if you're in the States, you can order it directly from them, but otherwise, talk to your friendly local game store. And Starcrossed is from Bully Pulpit Games. So which again, I think you can order directly from them, but if not, support your local game stores, folks.
Mm.
They need you. Go in there and tell them to order you a copy.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's next for you from now until creating these two games we've spoken about?
That's right. Well, yeah, obviously what's next is I have to get on this Starfighter game. Um, so I am working on this baseball game episode game. Um, and that's giving me a lot of joy right now. I also recently finished a game called Rat Trash Party, which I designed with my other roommate who has never designed a role playing game before. And it's a board game. It's really a board game. And she did all the illustrations and stuff. And that was really, really fun. I love playing with first time role players. I am really discovering that I love designing with people who haven't designed games before. They have very cool ideas. So yeah, my roommate Dana Johnson and I just finished Rat Trash Party, so that should be up on my itch soon. And then my roommate Paul Smith and I are working on. I live in a house with like a bunch of people. It's complicated. Um, and so he and I are working on baseball episode together. So we're gonna play test it this weekend, I think, and we'll see where it goes. Um, Kira McGrawn, who's by no means an inexperienced game designer, brilliant game designer, Kira McGrawn, and I are working on a game called Anemones to Lovers. Um, because she just tweeted that phrase, and I was like, "Tell me more." So we have a little Google Doc open, so we're working on that. So those are kind of the things for now. I think long term, what I would really like to do is publish a sequel to For the Queen.
Mm.
Lots of people are making Descended from the Queen games that are using that framework of like prompt cards to tell different kinds of stories. And there's some really wonderful Descended from the Queen games out there that I'm very excited about. And it's very exciting to me. And it's kind of making me think like, well, how do I follow that up? Or how do I is it going to be a continuation of the Queen story, or am I just making a Descended from the Queen game that uses similar mechanics but in a different way to tell a totally different story? So I'm playing around with that right now. So I
Mm.
think that I'm going to keep putting stuff out on my Patreon, going to keep collaborating and putting stuff up on my itch page, which is helloalexroberts.itch.io. So I'm going to keep doing all that. But I'm hoping that the next big project for me will be a follow up to For the Queen. So hopefully, if you liked For the Queen, you'll love this type thing.
Mm.
But we'll see what it looks like.
All right. Well, thank you for agreeing to come on. You've given a few other places where we can find you, but would you like to remind everybody where they can find you on social media and sort of follow you and things like that,
Sure,
please?
yeah. So you can find me, helloalexroberts.com is your best bet. I just have links to everything on there. If you're a Twitter person, you can find me at Muscular Pikachu. I've had that handle for over 10 years, so don't come at me about it. I love it. I'm also Hello Alex Roberts on like Instagram and a couple of other places, but yeah, helloalexroberts.com. Find everything there.
All right. I will make sure all those links are in the description below this podcast. Please go and follow them, support Alex and the wonderful games that have been made for our enjoyment. Alex, I'd love to have you back on the show, potentially for a one-shot in the future.
Oh, sure, yeah, that sounds fun. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, sounds brilliant. So we can organise that separately. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to get to meet you, speak to you, and learn about your work.
It's been wonderful to be on. Thank you so much for interviewing me. This is fantastic.
Well, I look forward to speaking to you again in the future, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to learn more about the show, then go to www.snydersreturn.squarespace.com. Alternatively, you can find us over on Twitter @ReturnSnyder. We have a Linktree link in the description of this episode. And if you want to support us, come and join us over on Patreon. And we also have a Discord server. Please leave us a review, because we'd love to learn how to improve the channel and provide better content out for those who are listening. Until we speak again, thank you.